Get started, as this is quite a quick lightning speed event. My name is Rachel Chassie. I am the Director of Innovation here at DiMe, and thank you all so much for coming into this month's lightning speed crowdsourcing. We've got some really exciting presentations today, and I'm not biased because I see that I am a presenter. And so let's do some quick housekeeping here about this really cool event. So do note that today's session is being recorded and will be made available afterwards, so no worries about quickly writing down notes. So each presenter will have a total of 8 minutes usually, but since due to today's interesting format, we'll have 12 minutes each. But the exciting part about that is the live Q&A session with you today on the line. So if you have any questions for us, don't be shy. Feel free to write them into the chat function or go ahead and raise your hand in the participant window, and I'll unmute you for you to ask your questions live. That's where all the fun stuff happens. And then afterwards, since this is a really quick session, we will continue the conversation over all topics over on the DiMe Slack channel, Lightning Speed Crowdsourcing. So feel free to jump on after there immediately after this call. And over the next couple of weeks too, we have some conversations there to really continue some more of the great conversations. So we'll jump into it today. So usually we have 3 presenters, but our third one wasn't able to join us last minute due to some scheduling difficulties. And so today we've got the 2 of us. So myself, we'll be talking about this really exciting new initiative that we're rolling out at DiMe called the Patient Directory, which I'm really interested to get your feedback on. And we also are lucky to have Karen Fortuna, assistant professor at Dartmouth, talking about some really exciting peer support measures to use in your studies to help guide patients through really meaningful experiences with your products and your trials. But we'll go ahead and get started then. All right, so as I said earlier, I'm Rachel Chassie, DiMe's Director of Innovation, and what we're talking about today is something that we've been working on for a while here called the Patient Directory. So this started because we really here at DiMe believe very fully that patients must be involved always, every step of development from the very beginning, even before the beginning, as any ideas begin and through development and through research, patients need to be included. It's vital to meaningfully include patients during every stage of development, because who can give better feedback on your product than the end user, which is the patient. But whenever we've been talking with development teams about ways to help make their product the most useful and to help make it useful and to help make healthcare the best it can be, development teams seem to struggle accessing patients directly. We ask them, have you been able to ask patients about your product? And they say, no, we have a hard time reaching them. And on the other side, whenever we talk to patients, it's a lot of, well, we have a hard time reaching development teams. And so there seems to be a disconnect here. And so what we'd like to do at DiMe is solve that. And so our answer to that is the Patient Directory. So we have something similar to this called the Expert Speaker Directory, which we have live right now, that I'll get to in a moment. But the Patient Directory is a resource where individual patients themselves can register, so they can give their information, whatever they're comfortable sharing, to be available to the entire DiMe community. And from this directory, the development teams can look and see who is available on the directory and go through and see who might be the most useful for them to get more feedback on their development. And we also think it's really important, while we're caring for patients and putting them first, to make it clear that if you're accessing patients through here, that you must compensate them. Patients are experts. They know, they have fantastic insight. And just as you would compensate anyone else on your team, we have expectations to compensate patients as well. And so I mentioned at the top of the screen here, the Expert Speaker Directory that we have, which looks a bit like this. So this is just a screenshot of our Expert Speaker Directory, but I include this here so that to give more information about the idea for the Patient Directory. So you can see here that people have filled out the intake form and included the information that they want to be reached for. Now, the Expert Speaker Directory is one of the things on our website that gets the most traffic and is used very frequently. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from other groups saying that this has been really useful for them as they do things like build panels or build conferences to really reach more people to give great insight. We think that this would be a great answer for patients too. So some sample fields that I mentioned that we're going to include are types of contributions. So either anything from sort of a one-off patient story to including them on overall strategy and development. Availability, if people are looking for board membership or strategy, or development teams or partners for publications, they can include that here. Preferred method of contact, of course, therapeutic areas where they have experience. But what we're looking for today is this last bullet here. What else would you like to see on our patient directory? How can we help make this the most useful for you? And so that brings us to our live conversations here. So if you have any feedback, any questions, or anything else that you think would be really useful, now is the time to let us know. We have been working on this a lot, and we've been working on shaping it around some great feedback, but we'd like to hear more. So if you have any questions, do feel free. And while we're waiting on some questions here, I do want to make it clear that this is for anyone on the line, any of the patients who are wanting to be included in this. DiMe is not, we are not going to label anyone as, we don't have a vetting process for this. So we think that this is the best so that development teams can go through individual patients to see what exactly that they're looking for, because what might work for one team could be different from another one, and it's not in, you know, our, it's not a part of what we do here to say that one person is better than the other. We're letting teams decide for themselves. But it looks like we've got some questions rolling in. Let's see here. Okay, so let's have a great question here from Casey. Let me see if I can unmute you. Casey, can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you, and I unmuted myself. I just, you know, didn't want to start talking before you asked me.
Perfect, Casey, go ahead.
And one of the, you know, and I'm not firing up my, you know, let's just say that my hair is standing straight up off my head, so I'm just going to keep my camera off. But I do think that there needs to be some sort of provision made for some kind of vetting based on my direct experience in other patient community, higher patients, et cetera. And full disclosure, I'm one of the charter authors of the Patients Included charters. And we recognize that one of the things that we failed to do when we wrote the charters 10 years ago, or started writing charters 10 years ago, is that we failed to really address the compensation issue. But compensation should be commensurate with one's level of expertise and contribution to the project, obviously. But that does require at least some sort of vetting or you know, certification process, or you know, something. And I think that that's one of the places where a patient panel of, you know, people vetting could be useful. And you know, I mean, there's different tacks people could take, but it is important that excuse me, there be some kind of process, because otherwise you get a bunch of randos running. Trust me, it will happen. You'll get a bunch of randos running in and possibly pretending to be something they're not. Hello, welcome to the internet.
Sure, thanks, Casey. That's great feedback. Yes, so what you have shared is something that we have heard quite often around our patient directory, and we've been really working on ways to help address that in a meaningful way. So for DiMe, what we've decided is to, it's not for us here to determine who is a expert or not, although we do understand that. We leave it up to the teams who are seeking patient feedback to talk to a few patients, see who works best for their team, ask them some questions about their experience, and see who fits the best. I think from that process, the individual teams can figure out which patients work the best for them, and for the ones to see who connect the most with their team. But Casey, you bring up a really great question about being really diligent about who it is that you include on your team for making really important decisions. And there are some different certifications that patients can get, and they're welcome to include that on their intake form if they'd like to show more expertise and some experience too. We also allow, we're thinking about allowing attachments, so things like CVs that might help people kind of show their expertise as well.
Yeah, I think the ability to include a CV will be critical.
Excellent. Thanks, Casey. Yeah, we think that could be a really powerful offering too. Thanks for that feedback. We got another question here, it looks like, from Quentin. It looks like you typed in a question, but would you like to unmute yourself and ask it live?
Sure. I mean, so I'm working for medical device developments, and we use the process from human factors engineering to interact with patients. And what you learn through this process is you have also to be very careful and the interaction you've got with patients as to, let's say, put them in challenging position or stigmatize some aspects of the disease or their daily life. So you have to build some rules of engagement in what interaction you can have. And I think it would be worth to remind a bit these rules. There are a couple of regulatory compliance aspects, but also clarifying that's what can be done and what could not be done. I think it's a bit, it's always a bit sensitive, the interaction with patient in all aspects. So I think that would be very relevant to add on this patient directory. We've seen cases that can be a bit tricky, let's say.
Sure, Quentin, you're exactly right. I think whenever anyone addresses patients, there is a lot of sensitivity to be aware of who you're speaking with, right? And I think that without being involved when they're having direct experience with patients too, I think that sometimes development teams can be a bit cavalier about decisions being made. And so having more interactions with patients, I think, makes us all on the development side, or anyone who's being involved in creating solutions for patients, be much more aware of what's being created and how to create messages that's useful and also sensitive, because we talk about patients as an other sometimes, I think, but we're all people here. And so I think being much more sensitive and being aware of maybe the kind of language that's used is really important. And I think that your comment is really useful. Thanks, Quentin.
But we have a bit, maybe just to comment on this, just what we would like to add, that there are regulatory aspects to it. And the FDA may be quite strict on what really can be done and could not be done, depending on what really has been agreed with the patients themselves. So it's important to be aware of these rules.
Yeah, thanks, Quentin. That's a really great segue. I meant to mention this, and so you kind of plucked it from my brain. I appreciate that. So that's exactly right. So the FDA has been much more saying that development teams need to involve patients. And we have been working with some FDA partners, not necessarily with the FDA, I'm not saying that, but we have been speaking with people who are on patient-centered focus groups with the FDA. And so what we're hearing and what we're delivering right now is also in line with what the FDA would prefer. And so by having teams more easily access patients too, it also helps in line with sort of regulatory requests and to build it in as well. So that's really important. We're working with providing some feedback from the agency to help make this much more clear. So we really appreciate that. We got just a little bit of time left, and so I'd like to jump to John Novak. Are you able to unmute yourself? Hey, John.
Hey, thank you for this, and hello also to my friend Casey Quinlan. It's nice to hear your voice, a wonderful force of nature and an important voice in this topic and others. I work for Inspire, which is a company with a healthcare social network of about 2 million patients and caregivers. This topic resonates with me, and it's more an observation than a question, but as much as you guys can craft the patient directory that also tries to capture the goals and the abilities and levels of interest of a patient who could be a consultant, an expert on a particular project. I think I just this morning was talking with a father of a child who has an extremely rare disease. He works full time, and I think of him as I was listening to you in terms of he is an expert, he has insight to give, he may be willing, he or someone like him would be willing, but his time is measured a lot differently than a lot of people. And I think as much as I've been aware of companies that have reached out to patient advocates, some with metastatic cancer, some who are caregivers of somebody who is grievously ill or is extremely medically complex. And sometimes there's a disconnect there. And I think as much as there could be respect for and maybe crafting the directory that includes that, it's not by hours or something, but I think the more that that's out in the open, the more effective this could be for all parties.
Hey, thanks, John. That's great feedback. Yeah, we're hoping to build something that's really useful, primarily also for something that patients feel comfortable sharing. Everyone's time is really limited. Now, whenever you also add in the fact that you're also a patient, your time is even much more difficult to sort of pass around. And so being aware of the rich nature of experience for us all, I think that, you know, being aware of that is really useful. And hopefully something like the directory can help capture more information like that, and helps guide conversations in a way that's useful for patients and also for development teams. So thanks so much for that question, John. So we have a lot of, any more feedback, I'm happy to hear it. We would love to hear it at time. Do jump to the Lightning Speed Crowdsourcing Slack channel, because now we have to jump to our fantastic presentation from Karen Fortuna.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. Really excited. So today I'm going to talk about peer support as a way to promote patient engagement in digital tools. So I'm an assistant professor of psychiatry at Dartmouth College, and I work with peer support specialists, that they're patients, and I work with them across the globe in training them on how to be equal partners in scientific or industry endeavors to develop really cool products like trainings, and also digital products like smartphone applications as well. Great. And just next slide, please. Thanks. And so I do have grant support from the NIH, KO1. I'm also PCORI funded as well, and the NARCED Young Investigator grant as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So today I'm going to talk about the history of digital peer support, on what are the essentials of that, the benefits. I'm going to talk about how peer support promotes patient engagement in tools, and then a call to action, because I'll speak to mental health peer support specialists, but we see now that peer support is something that is happening around the globe. And so this is just an individual who has a lived experience, and they share that lived experience with another human being. And so this right now during COVID-19 crisis, we see this with physicians are providing peer support to one another. We see veterinarian scientists are providing peer support to one another. And then within the medical community, we see it for cancer patients, patients with diabetes. And so these are these patient facilitated networks, which are actually one of the best ways, according to the scientific research, to get individuals to engage with digital technologies. Next slide, please. And so with the digital technologies, we know that there's this law of attrition, where individuals will drop off generally after about 2 weeks of actually using some type of digital therapeutic. And of course, within the scientific research and even industry partners, that could lead to a loss of actually an effect on the individual's health, if that's what they're trying to address. And then of course, looking at the data, that could lead to a lot of difficulties with integrity of the data and then major misinterpretation of findings. And so when we extrapolate our findings or try to generalize them, we may be doing so with lots of missing data elements. Next slide, please. So peer support specialists, there's about 30,000 in the United States, and we actually work globally throughout Australia, Europe as well, with peer support specialists. And the majority of them do own smartphone applications. This is a group of people with a lived experience of mental health challenges or substance use challenges as well. Commonly, we see that these individuals also have experience with medical comorbidities too, like cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and they offer their peer support services to other individuals who have similar types of difficulties in their life. Peer support has been shown to decrease hospitalizations, increase a person's ability to take care of their mental health, physical health, and social health, so things like loneliness as well. And the World Health Organization has defined peer support as an essential mental health service. Next slide, please. Great. So it's really instrumental in augmenting traditional services that we have. So we think about the COVID-19 crisis, people can't really go into organizations right now. And so digital therapeutics is really, really important. What peer support does, it actually engages people while they're in the community. And that's where you get, you know, the real impact, because a 1-hour visit one-on-one within a clinical medical setting is not always, you know, how our health, our wellness actually works. Some of the things out there in the world could trigger a patient, and that's when they actually need these types of services. Next slide, please. And so there are some differences between traditional peer support and digital peer support. Really what we're seeing is that with digital peer support, such as these patient facilitated networks, is that we're actually able to increase the reach of our services. And so before the COVID-19 crisis, people were maybe peers were maybe providing services to 2 or 3 people in one day. Now it's going all the way up to 40 people in one day. And again, the integration of a peer with any type of technology platform, you're going to see that really increased engagement in that program. There was a recent systematic review done about all the digital peer support programs across the globe that our team did, and we found the ones that included digital peer support and actually community engagement and designing the types of programs, just what like Rachel was talking about, had the highest levels of engagement compared to any other program that was out there. Next slide, please. Great. So again, peer support has the highest patient engagement compared to other features like trackers, mindfulness meditation, breathing apps, psychoeducation. We see this time and time and time again, not even outside of the mental health realm, also in realms of other types of disease states that we try to address. Next slide, please. So this is really how it works. And so while you have a peer support specialist, then you have a service user or a patient, both of which are patients, and they work together and they monitor each other's performance towards whatever goal that they have. They have this shared lived experience of maybe it's cancer, maybe it's diabetes, maybe it's loneliness, and they have this authentic human bond. And I put these people side by side because it's a very egalitarian relationship versus a relationship where it's a clinician or a doctor and a patient. It's a very top-down relationship where the doctor monitors the performance. And so you will get levels of engagement by including a human being in whatever digital application you're providing. But with this egalitarian relationship, this is where you see the highest levels of engagement. Next slide, please. So this is the history of digital peer support across the globe. Really just started within the mental health realm in 2005 in the United States, and we do see it across all sorts of places like Australia, Europe, Asia. We have one program we developed specifically for older adults to address issues such as loneliness, medical comorbidity, and also mental health challenges. And then, you know, in 2020, we began to explore public reimbursement for that. But now in in May of 2020, you know, there's this rapid expansion where people are using digital peer support across the globe to support one another and to get people to engage in these digital technologies. Next slide, please. So we have this digital peer support certification where we have trained, it's actually 1,500 people now in how to engage in digital peer support services across the globe. And so this wasn't specific for mental health. We actually trained caregivers in how to be digital peer support specialists. We trained people who are part of like veterinary science how to be digital peer support specialists, and the National Guard has reached out to us as well. And so this is really to train people in how to use technology and support one another in that process, and really promote patient engagement in services. And now we have trained, well, it's 1,500 individuals in 4 different countries, which has been really, really exciting work that we've been doing. Next slide. Great. And so, you know, I really have a call to action. If, of course, there's any questions too, please let me know. But, you know, during the current crisis, we need people to engage in digital technologies. Otherwise, they're not going to receive whatever services that they're going to need. We know peer support is one of the best ways to get people to engage. And so how can we incorporate digital peer support into telemedicine, mHealth, and telehealth? Thanks, everyone.
Karen, I love hearing you talk. You really have fantastic presentations. This peer support model is really, really engaging, and I love hearing how it's getting a lot of traction. Even the National Guard reaching out, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, Casey, you're on fire today. You got a question here in the chat. You want to ask it live?
Yeah, if only I can remember what it was I said.
Yeah.
Yes, hello, referring to my notes. how many states do you know of that include certified peer support providers in Medicaid payment? So private insurers are moved to do the same in that state, because I know it's not all 50.
Sure.
At least not as of last year.
It is 46 right now, and there's about 30,000 peer support specialists that are out there, and we're actually developing international digital peer support competencies. And so those states, we're working with them to enhance their certified peer support competencies to include certification in digital peer support, which is like pretty awesome.
Karen, I've got a question. So I'm really interested in the certification process you all have. It's really great and empowering. How long is that process for a person to do?
Sure. So for this process, we're actually training a state right now next to me, which is interesting. So what we did with all of our research is that generally it would occur over 2 months for people to actually be certified. What we did was we revamped that and we turned it into a 4-hour certification and have a test at the end of it that tests individual knowledge. And then after that, states are developing learning communities around digital peer support where people support one another, and then we also come in and do additional presentations around supervision and also digital technologies, and we're getting a lot of requests related to addressing loneliness among that particular population, and how do you engage people using digital technologies even though people aren't together. So it's a 4-hour certification, and there's 4 different states in the United States, and New South Wales and Australia is training their entire state as well.
Wow, Karen, that's awesome. Is there any cost to anyone to do the certification process?
Sure, yeah, we actually offered 140 slots for free, and then all of a sudden we had, 2,000 plus emails. So that some of them are sponsored by organizations or sponsored by states. And then there's, and SAMHSA has sponsored a few as well, Substance Abuse for Mental Health Services Research. And then we offer individual certifications, and those are, I'll just put the link actually in the chat. And so those are $45 each, but generally most states have been providing those certifications for people. And so it's really cool because once individuals are trained, they can hop on board to any type of digital platform and be able to implement it in whatever way possible, which is really exciting. And so what we're seeing is that they're actually getting more people engaging, and they're actually getting more people that they haven't seen before. So they're actually getting more patients that are engaged, which is really, really exciting. And it's crossing the spectrum of not just mental health, but also groups like physicians and veterinary scientists.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see you guys really scale this to be a much more, more therapeutic areas, or even just, human things like loneliness that affects us all at some point, but also more people who are getting affected by it. So that's at the end of our time here. Lightning speed, like we said. So these are really great conversations. And so not biased, of course, but let's continue the conversation with any more questions or any more comments. And I love a good challenge, so throw them at me too here. Here at our Slack channel, which everyone is on the line is a DiMe member, so you have access to our Slack channel for free. So be sure to jump on there, ask us questions, and let's start a really great dialogue. And if this lightning speed crowdsourcing is something you find a bit intriguing, and maybe you've got something you'd like to present to the DiMe community or ask questions or get some more information on, feel free to reach out to me, and we'll see if we can get you slotted into an upcoming DiMe lightning speed crowdsourcing. Well, that is our time for today. Thank you all so much for joining, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.